I never thought a single weekend could completely change the way I saw myself, or the way my marriage would unravel, but here I am. My name is Vanessa, I'm 32 years old and I've been married to Ryan for 7 years. On paper we had everything. A house in a quiet neighborhood, 2 kids who I adore, and a marriage that everyone around us envied. People used to tell me how lucky I was to have him, stable, caring, always reliable. And I used to believe it. I really did. Until that one weekend when he went out of town for a work conference. Ryan wasn't the kind of husband who traveled often. Usually, his trips were just a day here or a night there. But this time it was 3 whole nights and I was alone with the kids. I should have felt relief or maybe even a little excitement about having some time to myself. Instead, there was a tension I couldn't explain, a restlessness that had been growing inside me for months, maybe years. I hadn't realized it until that Friday evening when I made the decision that would change everything. It started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself. My friend Tanya had invited me over for a small get-together at her apartment. Just a few drinks, a couple of laughs, and some harmless conversation. She insisted I bring someone new along, someone different. That's when I met Marcus. He was charming in a way that immediately caught my attention. Tall, confident, and with a smile that seemed to know secrets I didn't. I reminded myself constantly that Ryan wasn't there, that this was harmless fun. But the moment he introduced himself and I shook his hand, I felt something stir in me that I hadn't felt in years, not since I'd been a single woman in my 20s, full of reckless freedom and unapologetic curiosity. The night started casually. We sipped wine and chatted, laughter filling the room. The kids were at home and I kept reminding myself, it's just fun, just conversation. But then Marcus leaned closer, his voice low and teasing. He said something about how unusual it was to meet someone so uninhibited. I laughed nervously, brushing it off, but I couldn't ignore the spark between us, that electricity that made my chest tighten and my mind race. I kept telling myself I was in control. After all, I loved Ryan. I reminded myself that I would never do anything to hurt him. But words, once spoken, have a weight all their own. One joke led to another, one touch lingered too long, and suddenly I was flirting with a boldness I didn't recognize in myself. I laughed when Marcus complimented me, let him brush his hand against mine casually. And then it happened. Just a touch, a spark that ignited something I didn't plan for. I felt guilty, yes, but that guilt was mixed with a thrill I hadn't felt in years. I thought I could stop any time I wanted, that I could laugh it off and return to normal. But as the night went on, the jokes became more daring, the touches more intimate. It wasn't like we were in a full-blown affair, not yet. But the tension was there and I felt it with every glance, every lingering look. Marcus leaned closer and whispered something that made my heart race in a way I hadn't felt with Ryan in months. My mind screamed to stop, to leave, but my body didn't listen. By the time the night ended, I was trembling, not with fear but with exhilaration. I had crossed a line, a boundary I had always promised myself I wouldn't. And I knew deep down that the moment Ryan returned, nothing would ever be the same. I tried to convince myself it was just a fleeting temptation, a harmless experiment that didn't really matter. But I knew it did. I could feel it in my chest, the guilt settling like a stone, heavy and unforgiving. The ride home was silent. Tanya gave me a knowing look, but I smiled, too ashamed to admit the truth. I walked into my empty house, the kids asleep, and sat on the couch trying to make sense of what I had done. I told myself I could compartmentalize it, lock it away in a part of my memory that no one would ever reach. But I couldn't escape the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted, not just in my marriage but inside me. The next morning I tried to act normal. I made breakfast, packed lunches, and smiled at my kids, playing the part of the responsible, devoted mother. But every time my mind wandered, I saw Marcus's smile, felt his touch, heard the low teasing tone of his voice. I hated myself for it, but I also couldn't deny that part of me was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. I kept telling myself, Ryan isn't here, this doesn't count, it's nothing. But I knew deep down that it did count. It counted more than I wanted to admit. By the time Ryan called Sunday night to say he was on his way home, my stomach was in knots. I kept checking the clock, the door, my phone, trying to convince myself I could act normal, pretend nothing had happened. But I knew I would never look at him the same way again. I would never feel the same security, the same unwavering love that had been the foundation of our marriage. Because I had tasted something forbidden, something intoxicating, and even the briefest encounter had shifted me in ways I couldn't reverse. When Ryan walked through the door, he hugged the kids and then me, oblivious to the storm raging inside. I forced a smile, hugged him back, and tried to act like everything was fine. But in the quiet of the evening, after the kids went to bed, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I had crossed a line and No reassurance, no vows, no love, could erase what I had done. That weekend, that single night had changed everything. And deep down, I knew that our marriage would never be exactly the same again.